Okay, we're back at the gearbox. So let's have a look at this then. I've taken off the old bearings from this end and the chewed pinion, or whatever you want to call it. It's off the Kickstart. If you look down here, you can see the old one compared to the new one. It's quite chewed. There's the old cog thing there, or gear. There's the new one, how it should look, with just the one side worn. These came from Old Timer Boxer. So let's just have a quick look at those. This, for those people that are curious, I'm going to try and do this one-handed. So that comes off first. Little thing in there, spacer of some kind. Followed by another spacer. And you can basically just keep disassembling it like this. These ones appear to be on the shaft itself from what I can see. That's basically it. So all we're going to do is check that they're all clean and tidy. The teeth aren't too worn, which is not too bad. And reassemble it. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this back together. As easy as this. So there's one-handed. I'll do that in a minute. And then start putting the bearings back on. These are just SKF. Yeah, SKF 63032 RSH. I've gone for rubber seals. The original ones didn't have rubber seals, but I just decided that there was probably less risk of dirt getting in there, so put that on. Chains over here. We've got 3 at 40 links and 1 at 38, and they've got split pins, split links with them. That's it. Let's get assembling. Right, when putting this together, I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little tiny shim washer down in there. See on the end of there? But as you're pressing this down, that often jumps out. So be careful with that. Okay, so the bearings are on either side. Make sure you put that shim in, like I said. I need to tighten this up yet too. You can use the old current lid as a temporary holder. While we put the chains on. There we go. There's a good opportunity to make sure those end sprockets are lined up. Yeah. Make sure they're the same height, which they're not, interesting enough. Let me just get the camera. Right, I'll try and show this, but they should be kind of level across the top. This one, I can get my finger in there. This one's slightly higher. So yeah. Camera back, there we go. So we need to make sure that they look level all the way across. It's difficult to show this on the camera, but that's what I need to do now. I have to chuck some more shims in it. Right, I quickly whipped off and did that. So now we need to work out which way this rotates, because these chains have obviously got splits in them. So just make sure, just so we know which way the retaining pin goes. Let's just have a think about this. So I've just slid a chain on. And you can see already, hopefully you can see that. There you go. They're already much tighter even with the slice mount. On the other ones, well, the other chains, even when we pulled this apart, they were still flapping around, so you can see they're better. And it's purely because of the OD on the roller, like I said. So let's get all these on. Now remember, of course, that because these double chains, you've obviously got 3 of these keepers. So you've got 2 of them down to get in there. Which, you've guessed it, is fiddly. Well, I'll do that 4 times as well. So this is going to take a bit of time. So up next is the gearbox casings. Now, as I said to you before, we're going to convert this to a dry clutch, or I am. And we need to block off this hole here. And we need to block off this hole here. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see there's a bit of a, other than a crack, there's a taper to that, which luckily helps us make a piece to block it off. So what I'm going to do is cut a piece of aluminium, shape it to fit in there. Then I'm going to drill 2 studs through either side and pin it, and then use some super glue or JB Weld or something like that. Probably go for JB Weld. At the same time, I'm going to try and stop this crack spreading any further. So I'm going to just drill in there and fill that with JB Weld, and put a little groove in as well and fill that up. I'll probably do it on the outside because this one faces the flywheel, whereas this one, if any bits come off, will go into the actual chains. So that's what we're going to do. Right, this hole over here we need to block off. That one, the easiest way to do that, I think, is going to be to cut a chamfer in there all the way around, and then put a big screw head down in to slot it in. It's just on the back end of the bearing anyway, which is no longer used, as I'm using a rubber seal on it, so we don't need oil to go in and out. It'll probably be okay, to be honest, because of the rubber seals. I doubt very much oil will go through, but I might block it off anyway. Right, so that's all dried. So these are original carb covers, and this is the one I made in the earlier video. So you can see it fits quite nicely now. So that's that problem sorted. Okay, so just before we start, you can see down there the score marks, how bad they were from the chains lashing around with slack in them, which is partly why we needed to fix them. Ultimately, I suppose you could run them with them sloppy, but eventually it will eat its way through the case. And again, there's a slight mark up there as well. So M7 washers, that's what fits in there. So if you haven't got any, you're going to have to order some. Followed by M6 springs and clips, and put the 4 bolts back in. Right, you should be able to turn this. Of course, don't forget there's no selector, so you have to make sure the selectors are out. Though you haven't got both engaged, of course, because it'll just lock up. There you go. Right, what's next? Okay, so now we need to put the kickstart in. It's all greased up in there. Need to rotate this. Give the handle a good runce round. There we go. Get a bit of spring in it. And then slot it in. And there she is, painted, and the engine sat in, so it's just the single engine bolt through the bottom at the moment. And so let's get the flywheel in there. Right, it's in. Remember when you're putting a screwdriver in here, let's go on. Wait for the camera to focus, there we go. And you're bending over that tang, remember not to chew up this thread, because you won't be getting that off again otherwise. Okay, let's get the clutch in. So I'm going to put 8 springs in this, because normally you'd have 12, but I'd never tend to put a sidecar on this particular bike, and I just thought I'd try and see what it's like with 8 in instead of 12. All Wehrmacht versions of course have 12 springs in to take the sidecar. So I'm going to, I guess you can put them in pairs. It's the only sensible way to put the 8 in there. Like so. And on the back of this plate I've just put a little tiny bit of grease just to help those springs slide around and embed in properly. Right, so that's that in. Give it a quick jostle around to make sure it's happy, and then need the clutch tool, which is just a piece of aluminium, a hole drilled through it, and then you just wind it in. It's M8, wind it in there and push the plate down. Okay, so I've just wound it back a bit to release it slightly, and then we got this big round clip. Now there's some debate as to whether we actually need this or not, but if you actually do the calculation and add up all the thicknesses of these discs, there is a possibility that in high wear environments that one of these tooth discs could slip into that, just catch where this ring should go. So whilst yes, in theory it's in principle it's probably not ever going to happen, in theory it could happen, so I'm going to chuck it in anyway. Quite easy to put in, just jiggle it around a bit. There you go. Easy as that. Next one in. Took it out too early, didn't I? Right, let's just wind that back in a little bit. There we go, it's just enough to get the thicker disc in, which is here. A little bit more. There you go. And then of course you have the ginormous great big clip to put in there, and that's it. So we plop that in there, and then we're done for it for the moment. So just before you take this off, and it's completely loose, make sure these still turn. And I've made this tool here out of an old spoke. Hopefully it'll focus on, I don't know, but it's basically a squared off spoke, and it's the same size as those, and you need that to slide in here to align those. There you go, like that. That keeps those aligned, so when you put the gearbox on, of course, the spline gearbox shaft will slide in. Otherwise you won't be able to get the shaft in there. And once you've done that, you can release it off once you're happy. Try and get it dead centre. Take it out gently. And then slowly release the pressure onto it, and hopefully it won't turn too much. Check it again. Yeah, it's fine. we go. Now when we have a look in there, let's pause this a second. There you go. You can see that they're all aligned properly. So now we're ready to put the gearbox on. So before we put the gearbox in, we need to put one of the pressure plates in there. A bit difficult to pack there. Now make sure that this thing is not tight, because if that's tight and you have to push it in hard, with the amount of pressure from the clutch rod, this will push in there so difficult you won't be able to get it back out. And if you can't get this out, tell me how you're going to get the clutch out, because you need to be able to put the screw tool in there. So not such a good idea. So make sure it fits in there relatively loose. It's a bit fiddly to get in, to be honest, but there we go. Okay, so that's in. Down there, and then let's get this piece. That is what this will push against in there. The other thing to look for is these are obviously made on a lathe, and sometimes there's a little tiny centre in the middle which will cause this rod to wobble like that. So make sure that that plate in there was smooth. Just file it down or something so that will fit flush against it. Okay, so all we need now is the gasket to go on here, but the gasket isn't that important anymore because we've gone for a dry clutch anyway, so there's not going to be oil leaking out of here, but we'll put it on anyway just in case there's a spacing issue or something else. Okay, so let's get the gearbox in. First of all, lube up the thrust bearing. Here we go, this thing. Just give it a bit of grease on it, stops some of the oil flowing around it. Because oils, don't forget, is going to leak through that primary shaft. And then you've got the two rods. These are different lengths. Put them there, look. One is 116 millimeters and to the edge, and one is 106. They have a 6 millimeter ball between them. I don't think it matters which way round they go in, but I put the longer one in first. So for the moment, we only need the that end and the longer one, and there, put a bit of grease on it as well on that surface. There we go. Then we'll insert that inside the shaft. There we go, let's pop that in there. Yeah, that's that in. Now we just need to slide the gearbox in, which can be a bit tricky. You've got to make sure these splines are lined up, so you might have to rotate it a couple of times. We'll get it in there. Alright, so I've slotted that on. Now I'm just going to push the other clutch rod in and the bearing, the ball, just to make sure that it's all okay before we bolt it up. Okay, and that's it for a moment. So starting to look like a proper Zundapp now. I'm just going to bolt it all up together and have a little test kick over to make sure it's fine. Now, anybody that has a Zundapp will be familiar with the jammed Kickstart. Move hands quickly. What most people do is rock the bike backwards and forwards, and it kind of eventually frees itself. But I've decided we may as well figure out what's wrong with it once and for all. And I've got a feeling it's just that a tooth where it engages the big gear in there needs an angle put on it or something like that. So I'm going to have a look. So I've taken the Kickstart gear out, and I think I'm going to just grind that tooth there off. Just stop it sort of locking at the top, so that way you can move it to about there before it actually engages. Get a bit more bit more weight behind it. Right, you can see there that I haven't quite ground the whole tooth off. This is just enough to catch, and the idea is that when we've got the gears here, the teeth, it just slides past the first but catches the second because of the angle they're at. They're sat like that, of course. So let's put it back in and see if it's better. Right, now you can see how the tooth there passes the first one and catches on the second. Probably took a little bit too much off, but hopefully it'll be right. So it used to get stopped there. Now it passes onto those. Makes it easier to turn, we hope. Right, it's all put back together. You can see it's much easier to do. In fact, I'll probably do it by hand. There we go, over here. Top. It's a bit awkward to film that one-handed, but essentially it's done the job anyway.